Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me here this morning to come and speak to you all. It's a huge honor. It's my second trip to Egypt, so very excited to be here. Just to give you a quick little bit of background about myself. First of all, apologies that I'm not able to present to you in Arabic. After my 20 years of working through the Middle East, I'm still ashamed to say that I struggle very much with taking my Arabic to the levels of presentation. So I have worked for Saracen HorseFeeds as their senior nutritionist for over 26 years now, which makes me feel incredibly old. For 20 of those, I have spent my time developing and working in the Middle East. I work and specialize with all types of horses, from the sports horses, riding horses, but my particular speciality is the endurance horse. As a nutritionist, it's very, very important to me that, of course, the research that goes on is absolutely paramount for me to keep up to date with, and always as well, obviously, looking at ways in which we can strive to improve the health, the welfare, and ultimately the performance and well-being of our horses. But it's very important as a nutritionist that we are able to apply that research in a practical manner. So I like to kind of be that nutritionist that is able to come and work with my clients, with the veterinary community, being able to bring practical nutritional solutions, nutritional feed management strategies that can actually be applied and done easily without overcomplicating. Now, obviously, the subject of equine nutrition is massive, and I only have a small time frame to hopefully what I want to do is to just bring to the table some little sort of ideas and sow some suggestions to provoke ultimately a little bit more thought and discussion, that if I am lucky enough to be invited back again, some of these subjects would be a talk on their own, in their own right. So this is just a brief outline of what I've got to try and whiz through. So apologies if some of this feels like I'm going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but obviously I will be around for the day as well to answer any questions and go into any of these subjects in more detail where required. So the first things, and again, obviously I'm bringing a lot of this specifically to feed management and the important points specifically for the Middle East. So yes, I'm based in the UK, I work in Europe, but everything that I'm going to bring to you today will be strategies that have come to light and that I use in the work that I do in specifically in the Middle East. So we're going to look, obviously, first of all, at what is important when we're feeding horses, and this does apply to whether we are feeding breeding horses, performance horses, riding horses, whatever. The feeding and the nutritional principles and the foundations are all the same. What will vary is actually how, in fact, we implement them depending and according to the situation or where we are. We are going to look at the importance of forage and fibre, because this is perhaps as well one of the most challenging aspects of feeding and managing horses, particularly through the Middle East, because of continuity of supply and the availability. Oh, I'm probably speaking too loud. We will then have a brief look at concentrate feeding, looking and giving some ideas into the right feeds and the choice of feeds that we can look at, electrolytes, and then as we go through, looking at some of the common feeding problems and how we can help to reduce them. Okay, so what's important? So again, what we're all setting out and wanting to do is to produce that balanced diet. And the two important things in this are looking at ensuring the continuity of water and fibre supply. And I've put those two in red and first because they also, as well, from a nutritional perspective, can be two of the big causes of the development of many of the health and digestive issues that we see in our horses. So meeting water and fibre requirements are absolutely paramount. Once we've done that, then we can start looking as to how we feed what we would describe as the calories into the diet. So the calories that are going to help maintain optimum body condition, body fat score on our horses, and the energy and the calories for the work that we're asking them to do. So that comes after we've ticked off water, we've ticked off fibre requirement. When we're feeding a well-balanced diet with a high-quality feed, then that will also be addressing the balance of the vitamins, the minerals, and to a degree, some of the electrolytes. So a good feed will balance and do all of these jobs for you. We want to maintain optimum body condition for the discipline that we're doing. So ultimately what this means is we don't want our horses too fat and we don't want our horses too thin. Fat horses will suffer more in the heat. Thin horses will not have enough energy reserves to be able to complete successful competition seasons without fatiguing too early. We're aiming, obviously, to use high-quality feeds, and that can be, and this is another talk in itself, but identifying high-quality feeds means becoming accustomed and reading and becoming familiar with feed labels. What does the information on a feed bag tell you? What do the ingredients tell you about the quality of that ration? What do the declarations such as energy and protein percentage and oil percentage, what do these things tell you about the quality and the suitability of that particular ration for your horses? And most of all, what I'm telling clients as well is to know your horses as individuals. So I can come in as a nutritionist with all the research, all the answers, everything, do this, do this, do this. But actually then it takes an owner or a groom to turn around to me and say, well, actually, in this particular situation, to do that practically may not be something we're able to do. So then it's up to me to look at ways in which we can try and change things to make things better, but also as well to tell me about the temperament of the horse, the likes of that horse, how that horse responds in different situations, because that becomes really important. It's not just about going in and saying, you need to do this and feed this and walk away and everything's going to be fine. Because if we want to be really successful, it's not as simple as that, and it doesn't quite work in that way. And then having used the word simple, ultimately feeding, keep it simple. So the more complicated we make a feeding program, the more we try to do, the more we try to add in, the more supplements we try to do, the more complicated, the more problems we start to see, particularly digestive-wise, with our horses. So I'm very much for keeping it simple. And that goes for everything to do with me. Keep it simple, and then things become a happier place. Now, I'm going to start with the importance of forage because, as I've said, this is one of the biggest challenges that we're faced a lot with the continuity of supply, and also as well the supply in terms of being able to have the same supply, the same type of forage, having a delay in forage coming in. And when all of this happens, we're actually talking about the number one ingredient feed that is absolutely imperative to the digestive health of our horses and also as well their mental well-being. So this is one of the biggest challenges that I work with, and I'm always helping to work with my clients looking for innovative and different ways in which we can make sure we ensure and guarantee our horses' fibre and forage intake, because this will help to reduce significantly the risk of issues such as colic, the risk of gastric ulcers, the risk of dehydration, and ultimately as well, better and more prolonged and successful performance. So when we're talking about forage in the diet, a lot of people will think of forage as being our hay, so our long stem forage source. But there are many other ways in which we can get fibre and forage into the diet of our horses. And this is where as well, working, I'm a nutritionist, I work for a commercial feed company, but we are able to work and bring alternative fibre solutions to the market to help actually make the continuity or the availability of long stem forage easier to deal with, so that horses are not left for long periods of time with inconsistent forage supply. So, as I've said, horses have a psychological and a physiological need to have fibre provided for them. It is what they're designed to eat. It's how they evolved. And even though we have domesticated horses for hundreds of thousands of years, their digestive tracts and their behaviour patterns have not changed to be able to deal with and cope in the way in which we choose to keep them, to manage them, and what we decide we're going to do with them. So their digestive tracts haven't changed at all. They are still geared up to do what they evolved to do all those years ago, which is to eat fibre, browse fibre, and eat it on almost a continual basis. And you can all see and appreciate that that is a far cry from actually, in many cases, what we are able to allow these horses to do. Now, pasture is the first choice. So, of course, I haven't come here to talk about pasture because in the Middle East, this is one of the biggest things that's lacking. But as a feed and forage source to fibres, to horses even, it is absolutely magic. It does just about everything we would want a fibre forage source to do for horses. It is rich in calories, it's rich in high quality protein, it's high in omega-3 fatty acids, and it's one of the most abundant sources of one of the most important antioxidants, which is vitamin E. So for the health of horses, it's absolutely amazing. When they're out grazing, they're moving around. This aids gut movement. That helps to reduce the risk of issues that we see, such as impaction colics, because we have horses that are predominantly spending time confined to a stable. So it allows as well socialization behaviors. It allows the movement. It helps with maintaining hydration. It does a whole load of stuff. And so what we've got to do is to find a way to replace this in a way that helps us to still then as well preserve the health of the digestive system and reduce as far as possible issues such as I've said, the colic and equine gastric ulcers. Now, we see a lot of different feed practices through the different disciplines of how forage is fed. So if we look at racehorses, for example, very typically we would find racehorses that are fed very restricted amounts of hay and fibre because of the impression or the belief that if you fill a racehorse full of fibre, it's going to have a lot of ballast, carry a lot of extra weight, and therefore that horse isn't going to be able to sprint from A to B as fast as possible. So in racehorses, fibre is viewed as performance restricting. But actually, it is performance restricting for racehorses, as we'll see a little bit later on, and to any performance horse because of what it's doing to the health of that digestive tract. So yes, we don't want racehorses carrying a load of extra weight up the racetrack, but there are ways in which we can still provide these horses optimum levels of fibre, but then change our fiber management 3 to 4 days before a race to actually be able to reduce body weight. But in the process, what we've been able to do is to preserve gastric health. Endurance horses, on the other hand, we are just wanting to feed them as much fiber and everything that we can. So it's fiber, fiber, feed, feed. We are wanting to literally keep these horses eating as much as we can. When we move into the other disciplines, it can be sometimes a catch-22. So it's a little bit too much restriction moving to the racehorses, or actually feeding too much, and we end up with some sports horses then that actually we're having to weight manage because they are getting too many calories and carrying too much body weight. But the belief that forage acts as a ballast and therefore it has a massive disadvantage, the advantages of actually feeding forage in the correct way and adapting the way in which we feed it has massive, massive advantages to the health, the performance, and the well-being of our horses. So basically what I'm trying to say is that it is not necessary for any performance horse or any horse to be on a long-term forage fiber restriction. Now, perhaps one of the biggest problems that I come up against and have to deal with would be the issues of equine gastric ulcer syndrome. And in those instances, we're looking at what we call splash ulcers, or the squamous ulcers that happen in the top half of the horse's stomach due to acid splash. And then we have the glandular ulcer disease, which is down to a breakdown in the mucosal defenses in the glandular area of the stomach where the acid is produced. Gastric ulcers is an issue wherever I go in the world. So we have equine gastric ulcers, horses with those in the UK, in Europe, and of course here in the Middle East. It's just, I think, here in the Middle East it gets a little bit more difficult in the way in which we have to manage, treat, and some of the strategies that we have to do. Now, I've been incredibly lucky through my career that I actually work very closely with an equine vet who is he is the world's leading equine vet in equine gastric ulcer syndrome. And he is also as well one of the lead authors behind the equine gastric ulcer consensus, which basically is the research paper and the document that tells you everything you need to know about equine gastric ulcer syndrome, the treatments, the management protocols, etc. And I've been even more incredibly lucky to actually drag him around with me on occasions around the Middle East, where we go into various clients and we will carry out scoping. So I have learnt an awful lot from, his name's Richard Hepburn. Sorry, I gave my PowerPoint for one of my colleagues to put the pictures in, and you can see how much experience they have about actually veterinary equipment and which way round it goes. So I only noticed this the other day. But anyway, so we go around and we're doing a lot of scoping. And when we are looking at the scoping, and these particularly nasty pictures, they're probably not particularly clear, but are scoping pictures from endurance horses just coming towards the end of a season. So you can see, hopefully, quite clearly here, that when you have performance horses that have stomachs that are looking like that, how can we actually really expect to get the best from them in terms of their performance, the longevity of their performance, and also as well how they feel, how they react to feed, what their appetites are like, and what they look like. And with many of these cases, and I think this is really important, there isn't just a one answer fits everything. So what we're working with, and again, this is something that's probably another talk in itself for the future, but what I just wanted to really say here is that with many of these gastric ulcer things, there are different management and treatment strategies that are really key to the success of these programs working, and then these horses becoming as ulcer-free as practically as possible. So it's just to say it's not one strategy fits all, because it doesn't. And there are many cases where if you continue to do that or take that approach without making other changes, then these ulcers just get worse and worse. But the relevance of this to performance, which is the really interesting bit, which is why we need to pay attention to how we can improve the stomach health of our horses, is because what it does to performance. So horses that are diagnosed and have gastric ulcers have shorter times to fatigue. So they are not going to be able to perform and have that longevity of performance compared to horses that are ulcer-free, or at least have lower grade ulceration. And there is a significant difference in the stride length. So horses that are suffering and have equine gastric ulcer syndrome will take shorter strides, but more of them, to get to an end point. And therefore as well, you can see that is where the increase in early fatigue comes in. So they have reduced stride length, they're taking more strides, they're using up more energy to get to that end point, and that starts to seriously impact on their performance. They also as well show a more rapid increase in lactic acid accumulation. So again, the muscles are going to fatigue, and this is where we see horses that usually, typically, will start off a season all singing and dancing. They come out and they performing amazing, and then it's almost like they peak. So they kind of get a quarter, halfway through the season, the performance peaks, and then it starts to drop off, and they either finish a season very poorly or they don't finish a season at all. And there will be telltale signs that will come to light as you move through that season. But if we just look at racehorses as an example, the effect when they looked at horses that they had ulcers, they were scoped for ulcers, they were then treated for ulcers, and they also had a change in their feed and their management strategies. And in this group of racehorses, actually it made the difference of 21 meters. So these horses ended up making up 7 lengths in terms of distance run, because they were more comfortable. Longer stride length, fewer strides, increased speed. So in terms of how we're going to make horses perform better, this is actually a really key thing we need to be looking at, and it is linked to fibre intake. So there's no shortcut, sadly, to be able to do this magically with a feed or with a supplement. There are certain feed management strategies that are key. So where do we start? We're obviously starting at looking, first of all, at treating them, and then we look at the management. So treatment obviously is going to involve the drugs, management is going to involve what you feed, how you feed, and also as well choice of supplements. But fibre has to be first. Now there is one thing that I really, if there's one thing out of all of the stuff that I'm kind of dribbling on about, if there's one thing that I do try and say to everyone as the message to take home, is actually pre-exercise feeding for any horse, because this can make an absolute significant difference to the incidence of gastric ulcer syndrome, and also as well how comfortable our horses feel, how they perform, and ultimately after training and exercise they actually want to go back and eat then the feed that we feed them and the calories and the fuel we want to put in. So many horses are exercised basically on an empty stomach, and this is really not good, because you can see in this image here, the empty stomach, we have all this gastric acid slopping around in the bottom of the stomach. And at the top of the stomach, we have an area that has no protection. So it has no mucus protection, and it hasn't got any feed protection. We then take a horse out and we train this horse, and as soon as that horse starts trotting, we're pushing then the diaphragm. The diaphragm moves to make room for lung expansion, and then what happens is this stomach then gets squashed, and the bottom of the stomach, where all this acid is, comes right up to meet the top half of the stomach where there's no protection. And there we then get the ulcer lesions. And the lesions that happen in squamous ulceration will be the ones that affect the horse's appetite, it affects how they look, and it also as well affects their temperament, because it makes them, as you can imagine, really, really uncomfortable. So this is kind of then the sliding slope to your reduced performance. But there's one real easy way in which we can help manage this, which is not going to cause colic. It is not going to compromise performance, make a horse slower, any of those things. In actual fact, what it's probably going to do is make that horse perform that little bit better. And so it's feeding what we call a chaff or a fiber meal, and there's some examples of the type of products that I'm referring to outside for you to have a look at, and these are products that hopefully as well, fingers crossed, will become more readily available. But just actually feeding a half a scoop of a chopped forage product will sit in the bottom of that stomach half an hour prior to exercise, mop up all of that gastric acid, and stop that acid then coming into contact with that unprotected area of the stomach. And that makes horses feel a lot happier and reduces the incidence of these ulcers. The other important thing about this is it maintains blood flow to the stomach. So yes, of course, we want blood flow during exercise to be diverted to the working muscles, but we don't want it all diverted away from the stomach. So having some food in the bottom of the stomach still maintains some blood flow, so that when horses stop exercising, we don't then end up with a massive reperfusion and blood flow back to the stomach, which causes damage. It causes damage to the bottom of that stomach, and we start to then as well interfere with the strength of that glandular protection and mucus protection in the bottom. So that's the one important thing out of everything I'm going to say, because it can make such a big difference, and it's actually a relatively simple and easy thing to do. So let me just check my time, because I do like to, waffle on. Am I doing for time? Where's my timekeeper? Am I all right? Okay. So let's assume then we've done all of the things, we've gone through, we've ticked off fibre, we're giving our horses enough fibre, we're happy with that. Now we can start thinking about what are we going to put into the manger, into the feed bucket. And I can't stress enough that there is no shortcut. No shortcut, because no concentrate feed, whoever's concentrate feed it is, however good they say that concentrate feed is, that feed is not going to work and do the best for that horse in that situation unless fibre is being fed first. It just can't. And that's again when we start to see an increase of people complaining that the horses don't have good performance, they have the increased risk of colic, they have loose droppings, all these sorts of things. So concentrate feed, whatever it is you are feeding, only works when you're putting it on good, sound foundations. And those foundations are the bits where I can really help, and the team that I work with can help to make sure those are in place. But obviously when we're looking at our concentrate feeds, when you open a bag, there's a whole heap of different feed ingredients in these bags. And one of the main ones that you'll be familiar with seeing, of course, will be the cereals. And when we're talking about cereals, we're thinking about our oats, maize, and barley. And all of these things provide that glucose, that rapidly available energy into the bloodstream to give horses that energy high, give that boost, give that acceleration for racing, give that explosive energy for jumping over 3 rounds of show jumping, and also for our Arabian show horses, giving them that lift, that elevation, that wow factor. So cereals are a really, really important part of what goes into a concentrate feed because they supply this glucose and this readily available energy. It's also very important because they produce glucose, and glucose is the only energy source that actually can pass into the central nervous system through that blood-brain barrier and actually keep the brain functioning and keeping these horses alive, basically. And this would be one of the areas, of course, with endurance horses, where we see endurance horses becoming hyperglycemic, starting to have metabolic failures due to a lack of availability of readily available glucose. So the cereals are a very, very good and important energy source. But, as we all know, they also as well carry a huge risk if they're not fed properly or they're not processed and manufactured properly to significantly increase the risk of colic. And as soon as we actually even start feeding concentrate feeds that contain cereals, we increase the risk of colic 2 times. When we start feeding more than 3 to 4 kilos of cereals, we increase the risk of colic 4 times. And so it goes up and up. So feeding cereals carries a big colic risk. And of course, many of the feeds available contain a lot of cereals, particularly things such as barley, because they are a lower cost feed ingredient. So they are brilliant, but they do come with a health warning. So situations where we would use cereals for feeding horses for particular disciplines. So cereals are important, as I've said, where we need speed, where we need power, where we need acceleration. They become less important when we're looking for stamina, when we're looking for longevity of performance, and also as well where we're looking for calmer, less reactive temperaments. So cereals, in effect, really are like our rocket fuel. There's also an increasing amount of fat or oils that's used in feed manufacturing now. So the majority of feed manufacturers will add oil to their formulations. The inclusion rates, again, will vary according to what that diet's going to do. So if you have a diet that is a conditioning diet, or you have a diet that is for stamina, then these diets will typically contain more oil than they would have of the cereals. Now, oil, in terms of then actually adding it, a lot of people like to add it to the top. They like to mix in additional oil. So they're feeding like Caron oil or all these different types of oil, dragging it in, and then mixing it up. And the feeds become really greasy. Fat and oil in high temperatures will very rapidly become rancid. That will affect palatability. And there is another important thing to remember about feeding oil. And this is another quick take-home tip. If you are adding 100 mils of liquid oil, so you've got your liquid maize oil or soy oil, linseed oil, for every 100 mils of extra oil you add to a horse's diet that's already balanced, you need to be feeding extra vitamin E. And that is because of the way in which the horse metabolizes it and digests it. So a rule of thumb, for every 100 mils of extra oil, you need 100 international units of vitamin E for safe metabolism and safe use of the oil. Now, there are easier ways to add oil and this really dense, easy source of calories to the diet, and this is the invention of what we call fat supplements. And these literally, like I just described these as it's fat in a bag, because that's all it is. They are not designed as complete feeds. They are just a way of getting in a lot of very high calories, safer calories than feeding cereals. So very, very good for those horses where we have massive high calorie demand, but also as well they need to hold body condition in a pelleted form, add it to the feed, top dress it. The horses find it very palatable. You only need to feed a small amount of it, and there you've got in a huge amount of calories to make a significant difference, while also as well preserving gastric health. So you'll hopefully start to see a lot more of these fat supplements coming to the market. A quick word on protein. So protein is another thing that I get asked a lot about. So the horses in the heat, they need low protein, otherwise increase the risk of laminitis, of colic, heat stress, etc. And there is just one really important element that I want to say about protein. And this is something that involves looking at feed labels and looking at percentages and what feed companies put on their feed labels. A high protein percentage of a feed that contains what we call poor quality protein will produce a lot of metabolic heat because horses are not able to metabolize and utilize and break down and digest that protein. So they have to get rid of it. So they pee it out, you'll get a lot of ammonia, and they will produce a lot of heat in that process. Now we can have a low percentage protein that also can be poor quality protein, and it's still going to produce that metabolic heat because the horses can't utilize the protein. So we're looking not at the protein percentage. Again, if there's one thing I'd like you all to start doing, and that's to look at feed bags, and actually don't look for protein percentage, look for the percentage of lysine. Lysine is an essential amino acid, and it will tell you how usable that protein in that bag of feed is. And by doing that then as well, it'll basically give you an idea of how much heat or heat stress that feed is likely to put on that horse. Now, I'll give you a clue. If they don't actually declare the lysine percentage on a feed label, it's because they don't want to. There is a good reason. If you use quality protein sources in feed formulations, you want to tell everyone about it, and you will therefore declare your lysine percentage. If it's not on there and it's only protein percentage, I suggest you ask the feed manufacturer what their lysine percentage is. So yeah, there is always a reason why things like lysine percentage is not declared on bags of feed, and that will be in relation to ingredient quality. How much time have I got? Okay, so I'm nearly there. I feel like got so much to say, and yeah, I could be up here all day. So vitamins and minerals, again, if you're using a quality feed. So as a feed manufacturer and a nutritionist, my job and my job at Saracen is to do feed formulations. So basically, I'm responsible for the formulations of what goes into a bag of feed, and ultimately as well, being the one that is responsible for making sure that the nutrients supplied in that bag of feed are suitable for the particular types and disciplines of horses that we're feeding. And that means as well that if I'm doing my job right, and if the feed's being made correctly and it's of high quality, then we are meeting the nutrient requirements. We're meeting the level of vitamins and minerals. We're meeting the electrolytes. We're meeting the antioxidants. And that is one of the things when we're actually bringing feeds as well to the Middle East. Of course, things like the vitamin and mineral and antioxidant balances are going to be very different to those in a feed that you're going to find in Europe or in the UK. Because of environment, because of forage availability, because of all of these things. But the idea is, if you feed a well-balanced feed at the recommended feed rate and intake, you should not need to be topping up with a lot of other vitamin and mineral supplements. So when I'm talking about those kind of things, there will be horses, of course, because there's a lot of sand, that will need additional supplements to maintain hoof health. There will be a need for electrolytes. There will be, possibly in sick or convalescing horses, a need for digestive supplements. But there should be no need for needing to feed additional general vitamin and mineral supplements, B vitamins, blood tonics, energy boosts, all of these things. Because a well-planned, good foundation-based feeding plan will do all of these things for you. And then actually, in a way, it becomes my problem. My problem then becomes making sure that your clients and your clients' horses look and do what they should be doing on the diet that we've recommended. So it kind of becomes then the nutritionist's responsibility to actually be the face and be the proof in the pudding that this is going to do what I say it's going to do, and this is what you do need, and this is what you don't need. So I'm just going to, there are some examples of some feeds out in the display, I believe. We've got some samples to show you. But it's really to say as well, just with this slide here, that we can have, for example, we formulate, as I've said, feeds for horses doing different needs. And this is just to bring you an example. So the 3 feeds that are seen here have exactly the same energy and calorie content. So they are high performance feeds. They provide a lot of calories, but they have the same calorie level. So they have the same amount of what we call megajoules per kilo in each feed. But there is a big, big difference in how they are providing those calories. And this is where the art of then actually being able to manipulate and support the type and the level of performance and manage the type of horse you've got becomes really important. So we have a feed on the left-hand side, Enduro 100. The name probably suggests that actually this was a feed that was originally formulated specifically for endurance horses, but this now is becoming one of the most popular rations as well for sports horses, particularly in show jumping. But the key with this ration, if we're looking to support endurance horses, we need stamina. But we also need power when they have to power through the sand or they have to power through the final gate. So they need a combination of calorie sources. So this feed will use a combination of your cereals and also as well a combination of those really important fibers, and it has a high oil level. If we then move to the next feed in the middle, this feed is solely based on cereals. So very, very high cereal level, much lower oil level, much lower fiber level. And this is your rocket fuel. This is going to give the acceleration, but give very little stamina. So this is more suited to those horses that are doing that power-based work, like your race horses, polo type work, Western, that type of activity. Now, the unique ration, and this is a very unique ration on the market, is one that doesn't contain any cereals or any cereal byproducts at all. This feed provides a huge amount of calories, enough calories and energy to fuel racehorses, but it does it without any cereals or any cereal byproduct. It is a product that is solely based on fiber with a high oil level. So this makes this feed very versatile because this feed can do just about anything. This can not only fuel a racehorse, but it can fuel and keep a horse with gastric ulcers happy. It can keep a horse with muscle myopathies in work. It can also as well help keep a horse that has or is more prone to colic more healthy. And it can also as well help to act as a partial or part forage and fiber replacement. So this is just an example of how different feeds with very high energy levels can do and manipulate performance and health in very different ways. Now I'm going to draw it to an end here because I've had my cut. I will obviously be around for any other questions. We've got the samples, I've got the team as well here as well, able to support me with any other questions or anything that you'd like to go into a bit more detail of. I haven't had time to do the electrolytes or the water intake, but yeah, thank you very much for your attention.